It's a trip worth taking. A solidly satisfying actioner, which delivers enough thrills to please the mainline hot weather crowd. This isn't the nightmare of someone who stayed in town last weekend, but the eerie premise of Escape from New York, the very fine-looking suspense melodrama by John Carpenter.
Basically two kinds of films. One is a utopian, where you have some bright, happy future that we all want to have, and the other is the dark one. And Escape from New York is extremely dark. It's about a police state, and it's about the world's biggest, most vicious prison. I think Escape resonates with the audience for a couple of reasons. I first wrote the screenplay in the mid-'70s, during the time of Watergate, when Nixon was ran out of office, basically, because he was involved in a burglary. The whole feeling in the nation was one of real cynicism about our president. I wrote the screenplay, and no studio wanted to make it. They all said, well, you know, we've beaten up on the president enough. We can't have this kind of dark view. So it languished while American history went on, and I went on to other things. When the movie came out, we were all reacting to the hostage crisis in Iran. And I think that Snake Plissken is a guy who takes on this mission and actually gets it accomplished. And we were all kind of ready for that, because back in those days, the military was put down during the Carter years and wasn't very good, and Reagan was just coming into power, and we hadn't really had Rambo yet. So all of a sudden, this became a world of a whole lot of greed, and the streets became dangerous once again, and it started to escalate into the 90s, and now you have an incredibly violent society. And it seems to me that Escape kind of attends to all of those things. It's kind of America, in a way, put into the future, and it's both our fears and what we would like to have happen. When we went to make Escape from New York, we only had about $6 million. And this was a big, sprawling, futuristic world. It was an inside of a prison. We had to do it very efficiently, and we had to do it with a big scale. 1977, there was a big fire in St. Louis. It burned out a whole bunch of downtown. So we decided, hey, let's move in there and make that New York, because it's basically an Eastern look. We shot at night. We wet the streets down so it reflected the lights, and the town let us shut off all the electricity for blocks and blocks and blocks, and we lit the city. So basically what you've got is this shell, an empty city with a lot of bonfires and rubble in the street. This was a look, a dangerous, futuristic look that we created. It's basically film noir. It's basically from the 40s. There is one real New York shot in Escape from New York. The rest of it is done in St. Louis. But we did shoot the Statue of Liberty. That was a real New York shot right out on Liberty Island. Brought the whole crew and everything, and tied it in. If you watch the shot, it's a long dolly shot that follows a character through a booth, and he walks from the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island, and you pan him out into the Sepulveda Basin right here in Van Nuys, where the rest of the set was built. And it's put together by a kind of a seamless, dark mat on the camera. There was one sequence we had, I think you'll see in the film, where these helicopters are coming over Central Park. They're dropping food for the prisoners. We needed a big mat shot, because we shot this in the San Fernando Valley. A New World came down with Jim Cameron as a matte painter, and they did it the old-fashioned way with a glass painting. You put up a piece of glass in front of the camera and you paint on it. And so he was out there in the middle of the daytime painting New York in the background. One of the problems we had making Escape from New York was the special effects, because they were enormous. You had an entire sequence where a glider takes off and flies into New York, lands on top of the Trade Center. And so we had to do it with models. So we went to Roger Corman's New World Special Effects Company. And among the people who were working there at the time were Jim Cameron and various others who went on to become famous as directors and so forth. And these guys produced amazing special effects for very, very little money. There are a bunch of screens inside the glider, and they look like they're computer generated. Really what that is a full-scale, three-dimensional model made out of white lines with a camera photographing it. We were trying to do what you can now do on your home computer and your video game. We were trying to do it before the technology existed. Talking about Escape from New York, I have to really bring up Nick Castle. He brought something to this movie that wasn't there before. This was basically a straight action film, and at one point I realized it really doesn't have this kind of crazy humor that people from New York would expect to see. So I asked him to come and write it with me. He's an old school pal from USC. We went to film school together. His background is his dad was a choreographer and a lot of song and dance stuff, and he brought in the whole Broadway element. They go up, Snake goes into a theater, and up on the stage, prisoners are doing a very, very bad song and dance. Nick invented the Ernest Borgnine character, the cab driver who has the same cab he was driving back before New York, when it was a city.
I've been driving a cab here for 30 years, and I'm telling you, you don't walk around here at night. Yes, sir. It'll kill you, strip you in 10 seconds flat. Usually, I'm not down around here myself, but I wanted to catch that show. This stuff is like gold around here, you know.
Nick came up with the idea of American Bandstand as being the tape-recorded song that kind of undoes the president. His skewed sense of humor was something I think that we needed in this movie in order to not make it quite so bleak. In other words, there were things you could laugh at, there were things you could hang on to. We really needed that.
You always were smart, Harold.
Just one thing right now. Don't call me Harold.